So welcome to this month community call. Happy to have you all. And it's been a while since last time. I think the last call was in November. We skipped the one in December because of the holidays, but now we're back, and I'm happy to be joined by the Cloud Data Sources team. Who's going to share a little bit about what they've been working on lately, and maybe some of what's going on in the future. And if you have any questions on any of the data sources, the cloud data sources, please ask questions directly. Or again, if you don't want to join in with audio, you can ask in the chat as well. So I'm going to hand it over to the team, and they can introduce themselves.
Thanks, Marcus. Is it fine if I share my screen?
Totally.
Cool. Can everyone see this? I'm assuming silence means yes.
Yes. Yes.
Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. And similar to what Marcus says, yeah, it's our first Grafana community call of the year. So great for everyone to join us. And very slow. As a reminder, we meet every third Thursday of every month, where the next one will be the 17th of February. Yeah, and each meeting will have a different theme. So today is focused on the cloud data sources theme. Cool, so moving on to the agenda then. Seeing as this is the first time our squad has actually hosted this community call, we thought we would give a short introduction to what we do and who is in the team. We will talk a bit about what we have been up to with our Azure, Google, and AWS plugins, and then we've got some short demos prepared for the team, by the team. And finally, we will have time then for Q&A or any feedback that you'd like to give to us directly if you have worked with any of our plugins. Cool. So what is cloud data sources then, and what do we actually do? Our mission statement is working to make Grafana an indispensable tool to manage observability in public clouds and nurturing the relationships with them and our community to make Grafana better. But what does this actually mean? Simply put, we work together with cloud providers and we build plugins to integrate with their services and APIs into Grafana. And this collaboration enables us to not only have feedback from the Grafana side, but also from their side, because they know their users, much better than we could. So the current plugins that we currently own and ones that you may have used before are Azure Monitor, Azure Data Explorer, Cloud Monitoring, formerly known as Stackdriver, CloudWatch, but only the metrics side at the moment. And quite recently, I'm not sure if you've seen, but we've released Redshift and Athena as well. So now that you know who we what we do, like who are we? So to introduce myself, I'm Vicky. I'm the engineering manager for the squad. Eric, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Eric, and I'm an engineer in the team. So I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden, and I've been at the company for, I think it's in total about 2 years. And for this period, I've been focusing on the plugins and mainly plugins that are related to cloud providers. So CloudWatch, Cloud Monitoring, and Azure Monitor. Yeah, Sarah, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm based in New York. I've been with Grafana since April. And yeah, that's it. Andres, you're up.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Andres. I'm based in Spain. And I have been Grafana more or less same than Sarah, a little bit less than a year now. So yeah, working mainly on the new AWS plugins that you will see today. Isabella?
Hi, I'm Isabella. I'm based in New York City, and I've been at Grafana since September. Shirley?
Shirley couldn't make it to this call, so Yael.
That's fine. I'll go next. Hi, I'm Yael. I'm based in France, and I've joined Grafana almost 3 weeks ago. So I'm the newbie in the team.
Cool. So now that you know who we are, let's talk about what we have been doing now for the past, few months or weeks. Starting with Azure, as you may or may not know, most of our plugins have end-to-end tests, but for ADX, these aren't there. So one of the recent focuses that we would like to work on is improving the ADX plugin. And to do that, we would like to add in these end-to-end tests, which are missing. And similar to our other end-to-end tests for other plugins, this will be done using the end-to-end package from core Grafana and also Cypress. And Sarah, would you like to talk a bit about the template variable options?
Yeah, this is just a quick little update that was recently released. We now have the option to use our resource picker for logs for Azure Monitor's template variables. And we're thinking about maybe adding some more options there as well, like the Azure Resource Graph selection as well. And so we have an open discussion there if you want to partake in that, if that's something that's helpful for you. That's basically it.
Yeah, and that's about it for Azure. For Google, Isabella can give a few words for the Google authentication things that she's been working on.
Yeah, so what I've been working on recently is separating out the Google authentication code into its own packages for front end and back end. So to make it easier, basically, to develop future Google plugins because they all use the same auth.
And for AWS, there's a few things we've been working on. To start with, Andres can talk a bit about the AWS SDK.
Yep. So the story here is that at the beginning, we started with just one plugin for AWS. It was CloudWatch. It's mostly the most used one. But we are starting to work on more and more plugins, and we are seeing a pattern, a common pattern. So, for example, you use the same authentication methods to authenticate regardless of the plugin because you're using AWS authentication. Or now we are seeing more and more SQL-based plugins. So because of that, we need to refactor a little bit. This is kind of internal for us, but it could be interesting for people that wants to collaborate and wants to create new plugins for AWS. So basically what we are doing is extending the Grafana AWS SDK is this package in the middle. And we are bundling all the logic there to be able to handle, for example, multiple connection in the same time, or being able to do things that are not actually related to the plugin, but more related to Grafana. So it's easier for us to create new plugins, and also it's faster. So this Grafana AWS SDK, at the same time, this is the upstream AWS SDK, which is obviously maintained by AWS, but it's also using something that we call SQLDS library. That again, this is a library that we are trying to develop, so it's easier to develop generically databases, plugins related to SQL databases. But now BigQuery that is from Google, also Snowflake, which is kind of its own thing. But all of them are trying to use this library and more packages in the future. So yeah, we are really trying to scale up this approach.
Cool, thanks, Andres. And also, I listed the current plugins that we own currently, but we are in the process of taking over TimeStream and the logs part of the CloudWatch plugin, as well as X-Ray. The reason why we're in the process of taking this over is because they are written by other teams in Grafana, but we would really like to consolidate the ownership of all of these plugins since we communicate with the cloud providers a lot. So it would be easier for us. And yeah, Sarah, would you like to talk about the syntax highlighting?
Yeah, this is another small improvement that we're working on. There's an open PR right now, but we hope to merge it for 8.4 with CloudWatch metric search options. So if you write math expressions for CloudWatch, look out for some nicer syntax highlighting and autocomplete suggestions that hopefully can help make writing these queries a little bit easier. Yeah, and if you're interested, you can check out the PR and test it out and see what works.
You'll be able to check out the PR by the code because I don't think we're sharing these slides with the links. Cool, and then we can move on to the demos then. So firstly, Eric, do you want me to stop presenting?
Yeah, I can take over in a bit. Thanks. Hi again. As you know, AWS has this huge IT conference every December, and in last year's event, I think the 1st of December, they announced something that they called Metrics Insights. Metrics Insights is a SQL query engine that you can use to query metrics. And we in the team have been working closely with the CloudWatch team during the whole fall to add support for Metrics Insights also to the CloudWatch plugin in Grafana. So I think I'll just share my screen now and show you what it looks like. So can you see my screen?
Yep.
Cool. For those of you who have used the CloudWatch query editor before, you'll notice that this is a completely new UI here. So not only are we adding the Metrics Insights support, we're also making like a total rewrite of this front end here. So if you've used the CloudWatch plugin before, you have probably used metric search. We've sort of decided to split up the query editor into two different metric nodes, and that is metric search, sort of the assist mode, and then metric query, which is basically metrics insights. So not only have we done that, we've also sort of separated these metric search metric stat queries from the math expression queries. The way to go into the math expression mode will be to click the code toggle here. And I'm not going to go into depth about this because Sarah has already touched this subject. So instead, I'll go into the metrics insights mode. And what you see here is a code editor that allows you to enter raw SQL queries. The code editor has a pretty basic autocomplete provider that gives suggestions. So for now, it's going to suggest me to add a select. So I'll select average over CPU utilization. And now for the front part, I need to specify a namespace. So I'll go ahead and select EC2. And now I can click run query. And this will give me an average over all metrics in this namespace. But what is cool with metrics insights is that you can do groupings. So I'll add a group by over instance IDs. That will give me a graph of all the instances that we have in this namespace for this particular region, which is nice. The way that Metrics Insights works is that it's going to scan, I think, up to 10,000 metrics, and then it will return up to 500 of them. So since this is SQL, and it has basically all the standard SQL support that is out there, you're now allowed to do order bys. So for this, I can order by maximum and sort them in the descending order. And that will return me the instances that have the highest average of CPU utilization for the past 3 hours. So for this type of query, it's probably better to switch over to some other visualizations. I can use bar gauge. And I can also limit the result to, say, 5 instances. So this is one of the advantages with Metrics Insights. It does allow you to do the top N type of queries, which is pretty cool. The CloudWatch, the Metrics Insights editor in the Grafana plugin also has a builder. So if I switch over to the builder mode, it will allow me to create SQL queries using these fields. So if I wanted to do the exact same query, I would group by, so group by instance ID, order by max in descending order, and then we can limit the result to 5. So that's basically the same query that I showed you in the raw code editor. So I can also mention that metrics insights is enabled through the same API as we used for metric search. So if you have the data source, configured in Grafana already, this will just work. There's no extra configuration necessary. And it does work with template variables, so you can use them in the builder or in the code mode. And of course, this works with alerting. So yeah, it's really excited about this. That's basically all I have to say about this. Any questions related to this?
Is it the final design with this builder and code on top, right?
The final design, yes.
Because it's kind of, for me, it's a little bit more complicated. Before that, you kind of have everything concentrated on your left side, right? All the modules. So when somebody is trying to build your query, you kind of start with your SQL, and then if you want write SQL itself, right, was kind of more intuitive. Then now you have to look, there is this small builder code thing, which you have to change.
Okay, but you're talking about the metric search mode now, right? Because
you're
talking about the way it used to be before.
Yes, but I mean, with builder code, it's kind of somewhere on the side, because right now you already have a lot of buttons, right? When you have a query, you have this copy, delete, then you have this left side, which you have to fill to actually get the data you need. And now you have this another switch, builder code, which actually have to be the first thing you're going for when you create the query.
So it sounds like you mean the location of the builder code switch.
Yeah, I mean, because it was nothing was before, right? It's something new introducing right now.
I think that the point of adding this switch is because they are two completely different type of queries. I mean, if you're entering a math expression here, that is something completely different than building your query using the builder. So I think for that reason, it makes sense to sort of separate these two types of queries from one another. But I think it's really good feedback that, I mean, this toggle is not completely obvious to you, because that's what you're saying, right? It's not.
Right. I mean, because you have this kind of list boxes, right, on your left side, and now you have this like a radio on your right side. Why not to make it the same? And it's maybe if it's a different functionality, because I've never used it, maybe it have to be like the first thing on your left side, which you have to choose. You want to do builder code, I'm going with the builder. Then you got this region and CloudWatch metrics, right? If it's a code, you have your edit box. For me, it's easier, right? Because it's the first thing you have to choose if you choose a technology.
No, I think that, like, if I minimize the query editor, it's going to be easier to sort of detect the
problem solved.
This toggle, yeah.
This is how I would like it, but if it's final design.
It is the final design, but that doesn't mean that we cannot change it. So I think this is great feedback, and I'll bring this to the UX team and get some more feedback on this. Because I mean, like, there's nothing stopping us from having this toggle here right next to the metric search dropdown.
Okay, thank you. Because every time when I try to explain or teach someone how to use this query editor, it takes a while. Right? You have to use a mixed data source. If you have different data source like SQL and API, right? Then you have to put this one like a SQL. Here you have to do the payload, that and that. And now, there is one more thing. You have to do the code. So the less we can teach and more kind of streamlined is going to be, it's easier for the customers.
Yeah. No, but I agree. And it's a bit confusing with the CloudWatch data source, because it is the API gives you access to a whole bunch of different types of queries. So it's kind of hard to replicate that in a UI. But yeah, that's really good feedback. Well, I'll bring that to the team and the UX designers here, Grafana.
Okay, thank you.
So another question on that: are we looking to kind of reuse that same pattern of the builder code switch for the other cloud data sources as well, and potentially maybe making it like a built into the actual platform so that it looks. If I'm hearing Mikhail right, it would be nice if all data sources use a similar pattern and switching between builder and code, because I think it's really powerful being able to switch between them. But if all data sources have the same way of doing that, that would benefit all users, I think.
Yeah, no, that's my intention here, at least, that we'll have the same sort of design for all our cloud data sources. I think that's the initial idea that Patrick had when he made a design for this query editor too. And if I switch over to the Postgres data source, it has a sort of a similar, this is very old, this query editor, but it has sort of a similar concept here with the toggle between the code mode and the builder. But obviously this is in Angular, and we wanted to have something similar in React. So I think that the intention here is that we're going to use something similar for all our React-based code editors or query editors. If we look at the cloud monitoring editor, it has something. It's not using the new UI, but it also has two different modes: the code editor and Visual Query Builder. And this toggle is here. So I would like to use the same pattern for cloud monitoring as we use for CloudWatch eventually.
Yeah, it will be great to have like the single way to change from edit mode to the build mode.
Yeah, definitely. I can just mention that this new UI that you're seeing here with this type of header here, and also fields logically grouped into different rows, that will most likely become this will form the new baseline for how query editors will look in the future. There's work going on moving this. It has already been moved into a separate package. It's sort of experimental right now, but I think this is already being added to the BigQuery data source and a few others. So I think fast forward a year, most of the data sources, at least in core Grafana, will look something like this.
Do you have a style guide how you have to do the query editor? Like this is the components you're supposed to use for roles, right? Because there is a legacy components, normal components.
Yeah.
So what is the style guide, official one, which everybody can use?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And for the moment, there's no style guide. We do have a style library with components, and I think that all these components are not added to that storybook design library yet. It will be eventually, and I hope that this will be paired with some guidelines on how to write query editors and how they should look. But yeah, we're not there yet, but
okay.
We will be at some time.
Because every time when I look how other plugins developed, from Grafana Labs or from community or from what Marcus does in his own, it's like, oh, this is the new elements you can use. Like great, this looks more interesting, right? Because there is a history with years of history from where it started, right? The old plugins which use one way and a new one. So I like this design more. So maybe, I mean, there is something we can build some kind of style guide for everyone.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, that's what we're aiming for at least, but it will take some time. I think the UI components are still sort of in a beta mode, so we need to sort of fine tune them and make sure that they are ready for, like, publicly ready for using in external plugins as well.
Might also add that you can try out the new components already, right? The package is public.
Yes, it's called Grafana Experimental.
So this is the part of a SQL editor from Experimental?
Yes.
Okay, because I did the review for one of the plugins, I think for BigQuery. They already started to integrate it there. I think it was BigQuery.
Yeah, exactly. That's like, couple link there at the top.
So can we use this Experimental because it's a new thing?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely use it. Just beware that it's in like a very early stage, so things, APIs might change over the next couple of months, but I mean, feel free to use it.
I think also you need to use the main branch of Grafana, right? I don't think you can use the latest one that is published, like the latest production one, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not entirely sure, but I think you're right there.
I think I tried and I had to switch over to the main image on Docker Hub.
Yeah.
But what is the life cycle? I mean, you use this component with SQL editor from experimental, then it's going to go to core, to components, UI?
That is not completely decided yet. I think that's one of the reasons why this was put in an external package. Potentially, it could still be placed in like an external npm package the way it is today in this experimental package. But the future, I don't know. Marcus, have you heard anything? Has there been
we do recognize, the issues that you're highlighting, that we have very different ways of building query editors. We are aware of this, and I think that is one of the reasons why we're looking into creating a new set of components that are specifically made for query editors, that specifically take into account all the different ways, creating logical operators, for example, filters and reducing aggregations and all that, and making it streamlined, like you're saying. We probably will need some form of style guide on top of that, but first, I think that we're focusing on finding the right balance for the components themselves. And hopefully, just by using these components, it will become more streamlined in a way. But I know that we are constantly working on these internally, and if you start using them, feel free to forward any feedback you have. You can forward in any channel of your choosing. And if you run into any issues, or you feel like this is not what I would expect a query editor to look like in 2022, that's also very valid feedback. And once we feel like we have something that we're happy with, I would be surprised if it didn't make it to main branch, but I don't think that we can make any promises at this point. Does that answer your question?
Cool. Any more questions, or do you want to move on to the next demo?
I think we can go with the next one then.
Cool.
I think that the next one is my turn. Let me share the screen. So as we said, we have a couple of brand new plugins. So I'm going to present you Redshift. This was released on November last year, around the same time than the CloudWatch project. And it's obviously open source. It's in this GitHub repository. You can visit it. Typical create new issues, give a star, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then give you a quick demo. So what's Redshift? If you have never seen it, it's an AWS service, which is a cloud data warehouse. So what does this mean? It's basically an SQL database, but that is prepared to handle petabytes of data. So it's like a huge amount of data there. It's also SQL-based. Actually, it was forked from an old version of PostgreSQL. So from the Grafana perspective, you're going to have kind of a similar user experience than if you were using PostgreSQL, but with the main difference that you can take advantage of the AWS authentication, and you can authenticate, for example, using a managed secret or using your AWS credentials. So let's jump into the demo. Here I have an instance in EC2, and I have installed Grafana and Redshift on it. So in the plugin page, you can see all the README and all the information. And let's see how you can create a new data source. So let's go to the data source. Let's create a new one. And let's look for it. It's here at the bottom, Redshift. And when you create it, you may recognize this if you have ever used an AWS data source in which you have to introduce some common details. This is what I said at the beginning for the SDK that we are working on. All of this is common, so it makes sense to have it in a common SDK. So here, I'm not going to enter into too many details, but you have several ways of authenticating against AWS. Since this is an EC2 instance, I could use the IAM role associated with the machine, or I could use, I prepared this instance also be compatible with the default way of connecting with the SDK, or you can also use an access and secret key or a credential file. Then you can fill these. All these fields are optional. I'm going to enter into detail of what they mean. But the one thing that is necessary is to select a default region. In this case, EUC2. And then to authenticate against, this is common to AWS, but this part is specific to Redshift. And to authenticate on Redshift, you can either use something called temporary credentials, or you can use an AWS secret managed. Temporary credentials, they give you have to enable some feature, but basically it allows you to have a temporary password that will expire, or use a secret manager. In this case, I'm going to use a secret manager. Just need to pick a secret manager, and it will pick the details for me. This is the information that is encoded in the secret, and I need to select a database. So once you do that, you click on Save and Test. This is not going to work because I'm not selecting a database, but you get the idea. I have one prepared here, which is this one that is working. So that's for the configuration of the data source. Let's see an example of how you can query data here. So if we go to this demo dashboard that I have prepared, we can see, let's start with this basic table example. As any other SQL data source in Grafana, you can write SQL code here. So for example, here I'm just selecting from this table, this column, and I will enter into details about what this means later. But as you can see here, you have syntax highlighting, you have some very quite basic. It's not as smart as the auto-completion features that Eric showed you before, but you have also some kind of compilation if you want to. So for example, and then I will go into that later, because here I have some macros that I can also use, and these are very useful to explore your database. So you can list here the schemas in your database. You can browse tables, like for example, the belonging one, don't format example, sorry. This is the one that we're using here, or you can also explore the different columns that you have in your table. So now here, if I select the table, this is a macro, it will automatically be substituted with whatever you choose in the table, and also here as well for the column. This is a little bit more advanced, but if you want to modify the way the frames are formatted, you can, or you're using a time series, you can select it from here. And also if the values are empty, you can modify those, but that's not really important. We can see here that we are requesting the information, and the result is the same. So that's for the SQLator. We can see, for example, an example of time series. In this case, I need to go a little bit older data because it's some demo data they have here. Let's go a little bit into the past. And here we can see a time series. Again, quite similar. But you can see here that I'm formatting the query as a time series. And then I'm using a very useful macro in order to filter the query by the time that we select here in the Grafana filter. So this is really useful, and you have more macros. You can go to the documentation to see the full list of macros. but we have more macros to filter by other things, or to use times as a epoch in case your database is configured like that. So yeah, more options here. What else can I show you about this? One thing that you can use in Grafana in general, and it's also compatible obviously with Redshift, is the use of template variables. These are the variables that you could use to make your dashboard a little bit more dynamic. So if we go to the variables, and I can show you an example of a Redshift template variable, you can see that you can also use SQL to query your database and being able to return variables. In this case, I'm selecting the different environments in this table. So these two values can later be used here. So if I select a different environment, we can see here, for example, this table is using that environment as a template variable, so the data is changing dynamically. Similar to variables are annotations. So you are able to introduce manual annotations in your query. So if you want to annotate something, I don't know, change to production, whatever. So you can do those annotation manually, but you can also use those annotation programmatically. So I have here an annotation that says, okay, if in my environment the humidity goes over 95%, just create an annotation. And this is the kind of things that you can do. And here there is the toggle for the annotation, and you can see here that we are starting to see some annotation that the event is happening at some point, and when it happened. That's one way of using this, but usually when things like that happens, what you want to do is to alert. And obviously this is compatible with the Grafana alerting system. I'm not going to enter into the details, but here you can see that I have created an alert saying that whenever the temperature, here I'm monitoring the temperature. So wherever the temperatures goes over 30, we are going to fire an alert. And I think that's all. That's all I wanted to show you. Obviously, it's also compatible with the login if you select the proper visualization. So that's mostly it. Questions?
I'm kind of curious from a plugin development perspective again. You mentioned the SQL DS package earlier. So it feels like all of these are using from the demo that Eric showed, and this one as well. All of them are using the same SQL DS package, right?
Yeah, in the case of Eric CloudWatch, it's not really an SQL data source. It's only using the SQL language, so that's kind of different. It could use part of that functionality, but it's not using that. In this case, it's more specific SQL databases or similar kind of databases. Like, for example, Athena, that Sarah is going to show you now, is also using SQL kind of data and language. So that one is using SQL DS.
So my follow-up question then would be, like, if I'm a plugin author that I'm building a plugin that has a SQL dialect, could I use this package to get all the nice, auto completion and syntax highlighting today? Is that something that I could bring in my plugin, or is that only for Grafana built-in?
Exactly. No, the goal is to have the auto completion and everything there. The auto completion is still not part of it. We are still working on this experimental feature. But for example, to change connections and to connect to a different database, all that logic is already implemented in the library. So if you want to have that in your plugin, yeah, for sure, that's available. And it's something that, for example, right now, the BigQuery data source that is being developed is using.
Yeah, I can just add there that this is still work in progress. But there's like work going on to add support for specifying your custom dialect for SQL, and then you'll get auto completion out of the box, yeah, if you integrate with Monaco. So this is work that we started, and then sort of the BI squad took over. We're going to try to consume that package for all our SQL data sources in the near future. So I mean that could be a really good feature. But when that day comes, that it's we're gonna announce it in some way so people will know.
Thank you.
Cool.
I have another question about this SQL data source. So to you, it's a Go package, right? So to use it, do we need to create a data source as a backend and then use with DS, or we can have only front-end data source and then interact with the SQL backend?
No, it's a backend package. It only works for backend data sources.
Okay.
Cool. So with that, I think I can leave the floor for the next presentation, next demo.
Yeah, so let me share my screen here. Okay. Cool, so I'm going to go through this very quickly because you're going to see it's very similar to what we just demoed with Redshift. But yeah, so we built another plugin for Amazon Athena. Athena lets you write SQL queries to analyze and visualize your S3 data, which is kind of cool. So again, to configure, it's pretty similar. You're going to see the same AWS login, things that you would see anywhere else. We just have a little section at the bottom here that lets you sort of browse what databases you have available and specify which defaults you want to use. Once you've sort of got it set up, you can click over to dashboards, and you can see we have a few curated dashboards for you that are hopefully not too difficult to set up with data you might already have in S3. I'll go through this Athena cost and usage report one, which is pretty fun. It lets you sort of dig into your costs that you might have with AWS a little bit more. You can see here, we sort of can look at monthly costs and cost per service and things like that. Again, we see the template variables that we were talking about earlier. If you wanted to sort of like, only look at cost per a certain region or cost for a specific type of service, you can do that. If you wanted to like dig into how we sort of set up those variables, again, you can write SQL queries as you would elsewhere. This is a very simple one. Just show all the tables and filter it up for just the ones that we care about. We also have annotations. Here you can see one that's for if a budget has exceeded. So again, we have a SQL query that when we turn it on, it can highlight, yeah, here we go. We have these little lines here that like say, oh, hey, the budget exceeded at this point in time. If we dig into how do these panels work, you're going to see they look very, very similar to the ones that we have for Redshift. You can, we're set up with default regions, data sources, and databases, but you can also make queries per different regions, data sources, and database as you'd like. We have these macros here for tables and columns that we just looked at in Redshift. We have the same ones here. We have the same macros for things like time filter, where you can take a time and make sure that it maps to whatever you have selected. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. We still have the alerting you can set up in the same way. Yeah, it's pretty much it, I guess. Yeah.
Is the time for the question?
Yeah.
So what happened if you will do insert or update query with the custom form? Will it work same way as select?
It's our intention to make these read-only. I think there's not really. I think Grafana as a tool makes more sense to be read-only as a thing.
Right, because now more and more, I have more and more requests when you can actually configure the data. And I mean, it makes sense to actually create like a form which can do select and I mean, insert and updating the data. Because some customers actually wants to go beyond just reading the data. And this is what I'm working on right now. So it will be great to actually, instead of just showing, oh, we can do select or show, we can actually do update and insert.
So there is nothing preventing you from doing that, but it's not the way it's supposed to mean. In theory, you should only allow people to select data or to read data from Grafana if you don't want to have a security issue in which someone has deleted accidentally the database.
Okay. No, but I mean, you can edit the data, right, within Grafana, not only select it. I mean, database administration is a totally separate story, but manipulation of the data, it should be possible to do in Grafana.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Like, if Grafana is supposed to be like a management tool for SQL and other services, that will add will have to keep like a completely new story in mind, and I don't think we're there at this point. So it is an interesting thought, but for now, this is something that we want to avoid our users to do. So when in the data source documentation, we specify only a set of permissions for this data source that gives you access to read data from this API. But there's nothing stopping users from giving write permissions to this API too, even though this is something we strictly avoid people to do.
Okay. So it's something I want to try actually. If you can give more permissions, right, to write, then create a custom form when you get an edit box, right, and just push the data, it'll be great. I'll try that.
Yeah, the tricky part is that, you know, the data sources really have like one interface, which is query, right? And that gets run every time the dashboard is refreshed. So if we want to add another interface for writes or something like it, then, you know, we would have to figure out how to do that in Grafana, because a dashboard is typically, like Eric mentioned, or I think it was Andres, that, you know, it's made to be read-only. But with that being said, we are seeing a lot of, you know, companies that are building control panels inside their dashboards for you know, controlling sensors and devices and like that. So it's definitely possible, but yeah, Grafana is the user experience for writing data back is not quite there yet, because it's not what Grafana has traditionally been designed for. It's possible, but it might not be the greatest experience.
Right, because I mean, you don't need to refresh your dashboard. You have a life now, right? So you can actually stream all the data from everywhere, and using these controls, you can actually update in real time.
Right, and I mean, you can write data back from your query editor if you choose to. You know, if you have a button that writes data back, you can totally do that. Might not be what all users expect, but for your data source, it might make sense.
Okay.
Cool. Well, that's it for the demos that we had, and thank you for all the feedback. Do you have any? Does anyone have any more feedback for any of the plugins that we've discussed, or any plugins that, you know, we own, but we haven't spoken about? Or do you have any suggestions for any plugins that you would like to see as well?
So I mean, coming back to my story. So now, I mean, you can read the data, right, about the cloud, watch different providers, but you're not interested to manipulating data, right? It ain't no point. Because right now, I mean, I have like this client who said, oh, we create this Grafana dashboards. Now they host it on these devices everywhere on different clouds. How I can change some properties of different devices when he has thousands of them using the data sources, using Grafana as a kind of operation center. Like how I can stop this AWS instance from Grafana. It's out of scope for Grafana, right?
Have you considered creating an app plugin for this?
Application plugin?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I do. I mean, some of them actually, oh, we have this Grafana running on different devices. How we operate Grafana from Grafana? Should I create Grafana data source to like have a user HTTP API inside the Grafana, or for AWS? How I can actually, I mean, there is AWS API. How I can stop instance from Grafana? And same time monitor the services which run on this instance, everything in Grafana, and don't go to AWS. And because, I mean, it makes sense if some services running on AWS, some of the GCP and Azure, and you have a mix of that, right? You don't want to go to different panels for all these providers. You want to have one control panel in Grafana to operate them.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you would like to have a way to for example, provision instances in AWS, create new machines, and yeah, provision like I think application plugins is a really good place to do this because you can have you have total freedom in how you build that. I know you have firsthand experience with your Redis application, so you already know how to do this. But I think dashboards are very much designed to be read-only. So I don't know the cloud data sources team if there's any plans on creating like application plugins for these. I know you're the cloud data sources team and not the cloud app plugins team, but still, you might have some insights.
But to operate the data application, you have to use data source, right?
Hi, so my name's Talina, and I'm working with our cloud partnerships. What you've mentioned, has actually come up in discussions before. How could we actually see what Grafana instances are out there across different cloud platforms or even on-prem, and how could we make that more manageable? That's not something that's currently available, but it is something we've talked about now, and there's some underlying work that would have to be done before that would be possible. So it's in discussions, not there yet.
Okay, but it's in the plans, right? Like in the long-term plans.
It would be a long-term thing. There's like in some of the underlying work we're talking about, it would enable that as well as several other things, but we don't have all those defined yet. So it's very much in like the pre-planning stages.
Okay. Because I mean, I understand that I can implement it myself in my application plugin, but I have to implement the data source, which allows that, right? Then work with that. Same with the like data. How can I operate Grafana inside the Grafana? But I mean, it's a lot of like work on my side to do it. I will share it when it's ready then.
Please do.
Thank you. And that's kind of it. I mean, if you can get something for the style guide on your roadmap, it will be great to see how we can actually build a query editor in 2022, right? Not to use like old technology, because as I said, it's a mix of the data sources and the panels, which was created in a long time, right, by Grafana and the community. And there is no one way, the proper way to do that.
And we have started the process of discussing this and trying to identify common components for data sources. I think what we've had in the past is that because all data sources are, well, a lot of them are very different from each other, but again, some are very same as well. So I think it's tricky sometimes to create like a unified interface, and I think that's the previous components have let you basically do whatever you want. And I think that instead now for the stuff that Eric has been working on to find those abstractions that make sense for a lot of data sources. So I'm personally super excited about what these new components mean for data source development. I think it's going to make life a lot easier, but I will make a point to we probably need some form of style guide to at least some recommendations for external plugin developers in what components to choose and how to think about where they should go and how to build your query. I think it makes total sense to have something like that. We're not there yet, obviously, but very good feedback.
I have one more question if nobody has anything else.
We still got 3 minutes. You're good.
So I mean, I wanted to. I talked to you briefly about that the difference between backend data source and a front-end only data source. And you said that you go for the backend data source when you need alarms, right? Alarming. And that's the only difference, because I mean most of the things, if your application API has HTTP, I mean you don't need to do backend, right? But actually, I mean for HTTP at the same time you can use existing HTTP data source and it should allow alarming, but I have not tried it. What's the big difference right now between backend and a front end only? Is that clear? I mean, if I have API, right, for some third-party service, which is available HTTP somewhere in the cloud, should I create backend or should I go for front-end only data source and use existing backend HTTP?
I think, Marcus, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're always recommending to develop backend plugins these days because that will allow you to, it will give you a few things that are pretty nice, like for example, alerting will come out of the box if you just implement the backend data source plugin API. So yeah, that's
but if
way of developing.
But if I use HTTP, it won't work, right? The standard HTTP backend with like fetch when I do the proxy and using HTTP backend, alerting won't work.
No, it won't. If you're using a front-end only data source, you can't get alerting. And the reason is that the requests are going from your browser to that service. So if you shut down your browser tab, that means that there is no query being run. So that's the reason why alerting only works for the backend data sources, because they can keep running in the background on the server, whereas front-end data sources, they only run in your browser tab.
Right.
And you don't want to keep your browser tab up to get those alerts.
Right. No, I understand, but still, I'm kind of use some kind of backend, right? The HTTP is a standard one, but I mean, I probably have a problem. Okay, I have to experiment with that. But alerting is the only difference, right? Because I mean, when you do backend, you have to spend your time writing the Go code, and then you write the same logic on a front end. So I just prefer for some third party, which I'm not supposed to have alerting, right? Not all of them supposed to have it. You can only do front end. Is there any other difference?
Well, so the other two I would say is authentication. If you have some complex authentication that is currently not possible with the currently available, the proxy rights, right? If you can't solve it with those, you kind of need to go to backend data sources. And the second one is if you have non-HTTP requests, like if you're connecting over another protocol, for example, then you would also need to use a backend. But if you have a REST API in the background and you don't need alerting, we highly recommend backend data sources because that's where all the development is going. But you can definitely do it with a front-end only one. But like Eric says, we are strongly pushing for backend data sources.
Okay. Is for example, query caching only available if you're using backend data sources? That's interesting.
So query caching would have to be implemented by the backend, right? So that is kind of up to you. But let's say that you have 100 users of your dashboard. They will all send requests to your database, right? So you would open potentially 100 connections rather than have one connection from your Grafana server and then having them all go through that. And then you could do more aggressive caching and stuff like that. But again, it depends on, it sounds like you have a REST API in the background and you're not, you don't really care about caching either. So yeah, I can't strongly recommend, like, I can't tell you not to use it, but we recommend backend data sources.
Right. Because sometimes, I just want to prototype something really quickly, and you can do the front end part, right? And then, okay, it's working, right? It's great. We can move it to backend then.
Yeah.
Probably.
I did that for the JSON API plugin, and now I'm kind of stuck because I don't have some dependencies aren't available on the Go side. So I can't actually do that because I would have to re-implement those dependencies. So yes, you can prototype, but be aware that if you want to move it at some point, you kind of need to make sure that those dependencies are available on the Go side as well. Just from personal experience.
I saw there is a backend what started to be implemented on TypeScript, not on the Go. Is there any timeline when it's going to be like we can use it?
A backend plugin using TypeScript?
Mm-hmm. The backend SDK is in TypeScript. There is one in Grafana organization.
Yeah, I think there are several. I don't think anyone are official ones. I know there is one in Rust as well. There's one in C#, and there's one in Java, I think, in Python. We have a lot of passionate developers who are working on these separately, but I'm not aware of any official commitment from the Grafana team.
Okay, so it's going to be Go SDK, right? And then front end. Okay.
Well, it's the official one right now.
Yeah.
There are unofficial ones that you can try out, and please experiment with them. I would be happy if you showed me something working.
Right. Okay. Because there are so many features actually done in Go SDK. I'm watching it all the time. What was done, and it's hard probably to do it on both of them.
It is a reference implementation, so it's probably gonna stabilize at some point, and maybe we'll see more implementations then. We'll see.
Okay. Because for me, if you write the backend on TypeScript, I would love to still have a backend on TypeScript as well, not to switch.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think unless there is, we're 5 minutes over, and I just want to thank you all, especially the Cloud Data Sources team for joining in and sharing what you're working on, and really cool stuff. I'm looking forward to have you in the future. And so we're going to have another community call next month. We haven't decided on a theme yet. So if you're really interested in a certain topic and you want the Grafana team to share their thoughts, what they're working on, please let us know and we'll make it happen. So until next time, see you all.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.